Prieteni, suntem alături de Alex de la History Legends, acest spărgător de mituri, Alex, da? Și vom urmări o discuție despre tactica favorită a rușilor care trimit valuri de oameni împotriva inamicului. Așa să fie? Hai să vedem.
My friends, did you notice that whenever Russia is making gains on the battlefield, there's always a certain term that consistently comes back? The New York Post, Moscow's meat wave tactic.
Cum e asta meat wave? Deci valuri de carne. Deci este o combinație între valuri de oameni și carne de tun. Așa se ajunge la aceste valuri de carne. Mi se pare o expresie foarte grafică, să spun așa.
Litters Ukraine battlefield. Business Insider. Russia is bringing back its bloody human wave tactics. CNN. Russia's relentless meat assaults are wearing down outmanned and outgunned Ukrainian forces. Oh, amazing! Do you have any video evidence of these meat wave assaults being carried out?
N-avem.
You just need to believe.
And it's not just random news articles. More and more experts are also using the same terminology.
The Ukrainians are mowing them down, and their men are not allowed to deviate. Now they're trying to just take it with human wave attacks. And although the Ukrainians are absolutely exhausted in the coke plant, they're still holding it.
For example, check out this video by Forces News. Why is Russia using suicidal zombie wave tactic?
Valuri de zombie, așa ceva, adică îi face și cumva cam descreierați.
On Ukraine front line.
What they're hoping is with mass they're able to just overwhelm Ukrainian defenses.
I mean, there's got to be a joke, right?
You just need to believe.
At last, I have to present you Anas Pope Nielsen, a fellow YouTuber and military analyst at the Royal Danish Military College. Can you guess what the title...
Ok, Danes. Hai că bănuiesc cum este.
Was in one of his videos. You guessed it, the point of Russia's meat wave tactics. And that's how the video started.
These are the attacks where Russia tries to overwhelm the Ukrainian defenses by constantly sending more soldiers and basically until the Ukrainians run out of ammunition.
Throughout the entire...
Acum avem și explicația de ce au rămas ucrainenii fără muniți. Păi au tras ca la tir, da? Și au tras în valurile trimise de ruși până că au rămas fără muniți.
Our video, our Danish friend, never shows us an example of what these infamous Russian meat wave attacks look like. As a matter of fact, nobody does. I had to complete this quest, so I asked on Twitter, is there any actual footage of so-called Russian meat wave attacks? My idea was that with all the thousands of hours of combat footage, it should be easy to find clear evidence of these human wave assaults. Over 200,000 views on the post, hundreds of comments, and these potatoes could not even provide a single evidence to prove their point. So many times.
Bă, dacă avea o filmare cu aceste valuri de carne, puneau link acolo, spunea, ia uite mă. Da. Și se încheia discuția. De ce n-au avut? Pentru că nu există.
Journalists interview a random Ukrainian soldier claiming to have mowed down dozens of charging Russians. You would think, with all the GoPros they wear, we should at least see a glimpse of these waves of attacking orcs. Yet they never show us.
Nu sunt de acord cu această expresie, chiar dacă este folosită în sens ironic de Alex, dar nu sunt de acord cu ea. Dezavouez.
I'm not the only one questioning the narrative. Check out what Willie OAM had to say.
Being told that Divka, like Bakhmut, is being held due to inflicting mass casualties of human wave tactics, neither of which has actually been confirmed. And I had it out with someone saying, we've not seen human wave attacks because you are not here and the footage is not being released. Simple. Alright, like Ukraine releases footage.
Da. Au asemenea filmări, da? Valuri de ruși și efectiv ei cu mitralierele, m-ați înțeles? și secerați toți, dar nu pun filmarea asta, nu pun pe asta. Pun niște chestii cu niște drone de sus, în care se vede un rus fugind de dronă, de-astea pun. Dar alea n-ar avea valoare propagandistică. No, deloc, desigur.
To them committing war crimes, but not human waves to benefit their narrative. The footage of these human waves would benefit the narrative.
Let's be honest, in today's age, the terminology of human wave attacks is more of a propaganda tool than a military reality. And you'll see why in this video. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. If you're new to this channel,
și eu vă mulțumesc că urmăriți acest videoclip. Vă invit încă de pe acum să lăsați un like. Dacă nu sunteți abonați, abonați-vă. Da? Și mulțumiri speciale celor care mă susțin pe Patreon și ca membri ai canalului Noaptea Minții, deoarece clipurile de genul ăsta sunt foarte des demonetizate.
make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped. And welcome to the headquarters. Let's start with good old definitions. Here's the Wikipedia definition of a human wave attack. An offensive infantry tactic in which an attacker conducts an unprotected frontal assault with densely concentrated infantry formations against the enemy line, intended to overrun and overwhelm the defenders. Edward C. O'Dowd adds the following: without any attempts to shield or to mask the attacker's movement. So as a summary, the core principles of a human wave attack are unprotected, exposed, and concentrated frontal assaults of infantry formations. Is this what we're witnessing in Ukraine? On that Twitter thread, some people did add videos, and we'll go over some of them together later in the video. But none of these videos actually depict.
Eu am văzut pe pagină la HOS o afirmație de genul ăsta, povești că stăteau pe nu știu ce deal și era încă Bahmutul nu era complet ocupat de ruși, da? Și tot așa auzeam povești, dar nicio filmare, nimic. Da, și am văzut și reportaje, venea reporterul la soldat și povestea ăla ce a făcut el cu mitraliera, cum stătea și vreau și urmă se strângeau trupurile acolo, erau toți peste alții, băi, o grămadă de propagandă. Dar propaganda se adresează proștilor, că n-ai cum să ai un pic de logică să urmărești fenomenul și să pui botul la asemenea vrăjiri.
Human wave attacks. Such tactics would normally only be used by an attacker with an overwhelming advantage in manpower, coupled with a severe lack of firepower and mechanized units. So let's add everything up. Zelensky currently said Ukraine has 880,000 soldiers, and Putin says that 600,000...
Ok, deci Zelensky are 880.000 de oameni în armată, din care în ultimii 2 ani a pierdut doar 31.000, dar totuși este foarte urgentă înrolarea a încă 500.000 de oameni, asta în condițiile în care rușii au 600.000 de oameni. Păi ce am făcut, mă, nene, mă?
Russian servicemen are in Ukraine. Ukraine has more manpower on the front than Russia. On top of that, the mainstream media admitted that Russia benefits from a 10-to-1 advantage in firepower. And with all the latest Russian mechanized assaults from the past few months, it's self-evident that the Russian army still has hundreds of armored vehicles available. Clearly, why would the Russian armed forces even have to resort to these so-called meat wave assaults? They don't fit in any of the categories of the definition of that term. Now, according to this Google keyword frequency...
Bun. Bă, deci e revoltător. L-ați văzut pe analistul ăla militar danez. Bă, e absolut revoltător că probabil sunt mulți care îl urmăresc și dau like. Bă, și nu sunt capabili să priceapă niște chestii atât de elementare. Cum a explicat acum Alex. Stai, frate, puțin, că rușii de fapt au mai puțini oameni, au mult mai multe arme. De ce ar fi ei cei care s-ar duce la ofensivă, neprotejați, cu pieptul dezgolit, cum s-ar zice, lăsându-și tancurile în spate. Nu-i de înțeles. Hai să vedem care e treaba cu frecvența asta. Human Wave Attacks. Despre asta se face căutarea. Ia să vedem cum a sporit de-a lungul timpului această căutare.
See in publications. The term human wave attacks only started to get popularized in the early 1950s during the Korean War. It's true that the Chinese People's Liberation Army had to find a way to beat an enemy that benefited from more firepower and armored units. However, this is how we depict the 1950 Chinese offensive.
Astea sunt valurile umane. Ha? O să spună unii acum, gata frate, hai să modificăm cumva pe clipul ăsta steagurile astea, să fie niște steaguri rusești și asta a fost. Dăm informația și spunem că ia uite și ce arme vechi și ruginite au rușii, totul se potrivește perfect.
Did it really happen like that? Honestly, press X for doubt. Especially because in this Chinese 1959 movie, they depict a heroic last stand against a tsunami of attacking UN soldiers, clearly depicting what we would think of human wave attacks. US Army historian Bevan Alexander analyzed Chinese PLA tactics, and here's the big picture of his findings. Whenever possible, the Chinese tried to infiltrate through enemy positions in order to avoid detection. Usually this would be done at night across difficult terrain. These infiltrations were carried out by platoons of 50 men, but sometimes up to a company of 200 separated in multiple detachments. Once the Chinese troops found a weak point, they would ambush this isolated outpost. Using their local superiority, they would attack it from the front and the flanks. The Chinese used a bugle to signal the start of the attack, and that's when all the platoons would swarm the enemy positions. Meanwhile, another detachment would bypass the outpost, push as deep as they can, and try to cut off the supply lines, thus forcing enemy units to withdraw from their positions. Now in November 1950, Chinese infantry regiments benefited from poor weather and the rugged terrain of the northern Korean peninsula. That's how they managed to infiltrate, encircle, and overwhelm American and UN mechanized columns, forcing them to withdraw 300 kilometers. Many American soldiers coped by saying, yeah, we got pushed back because we got overwhelmed by human waves. The Germans said the same about the Soviets during World War II, the good old Asian hordes. Now these Chinese infantry tactics became less efficient and much more costly. The moment the front stagnated, when both sides dug in and built fortifications. At its core, talking about a human wave attack, or even worse, meat waves, is obviously a pejorative term. It implies an unsophisticated and technologically inferior enemy that is ready to compensate for its lack of tactical skills by using brute force, which often results in horrific casualties, but that can be compensated by an unlimited pool of manpower. Using this same chart, unsurprisingly, after the Korean War, the next big jump occurred during the Vietnam War, and then again during the Iran-Iraq War. Back in the days, the Western media simply reported back what Iraqi officials told them. In 1987, the LA Times wrote, an Iraqi war communique said that an estimated 8 divisions of paramilitary Iranian Revolutionary Guards launched human wave attacks on Iraqi lines.
Poorly trained and barely armed, these young soldiers were meant to clear the way for the more experienced regular troops in what became known as human wave attacks.
The Iranians have tried to offset this by using tactics that hadn't been seen on the battlefield since the First World War. The human wave, unprotected infantry assaulting prepared positions of armor and artillery, is Iran's most powerful weapon.
However, once again, in this quest, we don't have an actual footage of swarms of Iranian troops just charging the Iraqis. The closest we have is this video where we see small groups of Iranian soldiers running and ducking towards the enemy. In this book, The Iran-Iraq War, Chaos in a Vacuum, CIA analyst Stephen C. Peltier wrote, "The Iranians did not merely assemble masses of individuals, point them at the enemy, and order a charge. The waves were made up of 22-man squads. As context, every mosque in Iran was required to recruit 22 men. Each squad was assigned a specific objective. In battle, they would surge forward to accomplish their missions, and thus gave the impression of a human wave pouring against enemy lines." Meanwhile, this is how Lieutenant Colonel Donald H. Zackrell summarized it. "It was certainly not a series of suicidal assaults by crazed fanatics seeking martyrdom." This is how Zackrell talked about the 1982 Iranian counteroffensive called Operation Undeniable Victory. The Iranian attack began with a night insertion of commando forces behind Iraqi lines, followed by a night attack on two separate axes by combined armor and infantry units. The Iraqis, surprised by both the location and the size of the attack, later claimed overwhelming odds and human wave infantry assaults by frenzied religious fanatics. Just like the Chinese PLA forces in Korea, Iranian light infantry tactics worked best when the attacking force could be concealed in difficult terrain, mostly at night time and during poor weather. Initially, this worked well against rigid Iraqi mechanized formations, but these same tactics became disastrous when Iran decided to bring the fight to Iraq. Because to do so, infantry formations had to exit the cover of the swamps to attack enemy fortifications across flat, desertic, open ground. There is a clear case for wasteful management of manpower. Even the young version of General Qasem Soleimani politely criticized on national TV the poor planning of the Iranian offensives. On top of that, many of the squads sent in first were untrained teenagers recruited by clerics. In most of the footage I could find, they didn't even have helmets or any kind of protection. Many were sacrificed to running across minefields or while facing the wrath of Iraqi firepower for little to no tactical gains. In the end, the lack of fire support, the predictability of Iranian assaults, and poor implementation of small unit tactics caused 140,000 Iranians KIA or wounded within 3 months. As part of Operations Karbala 4 and 5 against the city of Al-Basra. As you can see, for both the Korean War and the Iran-Iraq War, the term human wave attacks was more of a propaganda tool rather than a military reality. It was used to denigrate the opponent and to rationalize multiple setbacks on the battlefield. Now back to the Ukraine War. Have such tactics.
Dublu scop. Și ridiculizezi adversarul și îți explici faptul că ai luat-o pe cocoaș. Noi suntem buni, dar ăia-s mulți.
It's ever been used. As you know, the battlefield in Ukraine is heavily surveilled. If Russians relied on meat waves, then there should be lots of footage available. Yet the moment we ask for footage, crickets. This entire myth was born during the Battle of Bakhmut. But like I explained in my previous videos, this was a misconstruction of actual Wagnerian tactics. We all remember the story of the army of men equipped with shovels. This guy here that commented underneath
Lopeți, dar nu orice fel de lopeți, ci ruginite.
If my post summarized the problem, there is absolutely no evidence of big Russian losses. Hold my beer. People confuse human wave attacks with costly tactical blunders. It's not the same thing. In that case, we can say that the Allies also used human wave tactics during World War II. Just take a look at British infantry casualty rates in the Normandy campaign, or how American infantry regiments just evaporated during the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest. Here are some examples of evidence provided to prove the existence of such Russian meat wave attacks. Like you can see here, this Russian squad is pinned down. It's chaos. They're crawling one on top of each other before getting targeted by a shell. Same thing here where it says, mass retreat of Russian soldiers in Zaporozhye direction, observed by a Ukrainian drone. Thing is, these guys are running away from their combat positions. Clearly, it's not an attack. Now there was this footage from summer 2023 on the Luhansk front. We see a recon unit of 14 Russian soldiers running away from this tree line after having been detected. And that's when they get targeted by Ukrainian artillery. As a matter of fact, this Russian infantry unit attempted to shield and mask their movement using this tree line. They attacked in that direction because it provides a minimum of cover. This alone goes against the definition of a human wave attack. As a matter
Da? Deci apare noul concept. Rușii nu că atacă în valuri, ci fug în valuri umane. Cât de tare este asta?
of fact, we've never seen
Valuri de 14 oameni.
Russian or Ukrainian infantry attack by foot across the fields, right in the middle. However, if you want to categorize what I just showed you as human wave attack, then whenever Ukrainians are also running away in compact formations, it should also be human waves, right? Obviously not. It's only considered a human wave when the Russians do it. Oh yeah, this footage that I'm going to show you now has been used over and over as ultimate proof of Russian heat wave attacks. It dates back from the 18th of December west of Bakhmut. I encountered 23 soldiers walking unopposed in dispersed order across a field with...
Păi astea sunt valuri. Știam că să fie val trebuie să și fugă. Nu mergi așa la pas trăgând din țigari.
Some trees spread out over the place. These guys are part of the second wave. They're reinforcements meant to strengthen the positions of the first wave, meaning they're not actually attacking the enemy. It's literally a tactical deployment. Then the platoon spreads out in fire teams to occupy the houses of this residential sector. That's
Nu echipe de pompieri, ați înțeles, de trăgători.
only when they get targeted by artillery fire and FPV drones. The caption here states, Russians behave like zombies, like meat without fear and self-preservation instinct. This is footage from the Battle of Avdiivka. We see a fire team of 6 Russian soldiers. They're simply
Dacă sunt 6, nu mai este val, atunci este doar văluți.
walking along a path in a forest that had already been captured. They were in friendly territory. Once again, there were reinforcements going
Erau pe teritoriu friendly, ocupat de ei.
towards the contact line. And that's the problem. If we consider 6 men a human wave, then any battle we will see is always a human wave. With that being said, they probably would have been safer had they maintained proper distance of 5 to 10 meters between each man. Also watch out for selective bias. You're only shown footage and videos of Russian units being hit, but there must be hundreds of similar movements being carried out on a daily basis without any casualties being reported. Now, only a fraction of these video evidence actually take place in combat situations. Since drones see everything, in order to evade detection, you have no other choice but to carry recon missions by foot, most often parties of 5 to 7 men that will make use of forests and various terrain elements to infiltrate enemy lines. Now it's true these days many of such dangerous missions are assigned to Storm Z units, but we also know that the Russians have many specialized recon detachments as well. If this continuous stream of recon units is considered a human wave, what about this footage where we see a Ukrainian recon unit pushing out of Piatikhatki during the summer? They're exchanging fire with the enemy without any air cover, without any armored units nearby, a pure infantry assault out in the open along this road. And at the end, they're retreating in column formation under aviation bombardment. At this point, the potatoes got desperate. Any footage showing a tightly packed group of Russian soldiers, human wave. Now, since there's no evidence of wave of Russian soldiers charging the enemy, they started to twist and tiptoe. Listen, Russian meat wave attacks don't necessarily involve only infantry. Look at all the footage of destroyed Russian vehicles near Avdiivka. These potato heads literally
NAFO dudes.
just buried themselves. Here's why. Number 1, we have to go back to the definition of a human wave attack. Unprotected, exposed, and concentrated frontal assault of infantry formations. In that case, a Russian mechanized column that gets targeted by mines, artillery, and drones doesn't fit that description. Because the riflemen are protected inside the BMPs.
nu sunt infanterii.
There's an effort to shield the troops, and the BMPs are themselves protected by mine-rolling tanks. And it works because the moment they get targeted, all the passengers, the riflemen, and the crews run away. And we know that these mechanized assaults are always supported by some sort of artillery barrage. Yes, there are many videos of Ukrainians inflicting heavy casualties on Russian armored columns. I don't deny this at all. Recently there was this video released. I think it was a night assault with 2-3 BMPs disembarking their infantry in a tree line. And that's when they get hit. But the fact that they attacked at night, concealment, with BMPs, shielded and dropped off in a tree line, unexposed. As a matter of fact, the big difference between the Battle of Bakhmut and the Battle of Avdiivka is the increased use of armored vehicles in Avdiivka compared to the infantry-centric tactics of Bakhmut. And the heavy use of BMPs drastically reduced Russian casualties. Armored vehicles like BMPs are essential for offensive operations. When properly used, they can exploit breakthroughs and push the front line multiple kilometers forward in an instant.
Astea sunt imagini din robotine.
Here you can see how Russian armored vehicles managed to drive 4 kilometers in one go and successfully disembark riflemen squads right at the center of the village of Robotine. This action here was described as a banzai charge by Forbes. Did you hear that? A banzai charge. I give up. This operation would have not been possible.
Ce înseamnă banzai charge? Care știe? Sunt convins că unii dintre voi știți. Vă rog să scrieți la comentarii, că-s curios.
Using infantry alone. So number one, it doesn't fit the definition of a human wave. Number two, if all these mechanized column blunders fall into the category of meat wave attacks, then how should we describe the following? On the first day of the counteroffensive, 10 Ukrainian vehicles, an entire column, obliterated. A couple days later, 9 M2 Bradleys and 1 Leopard 2 destroyed at that one spot alone. This Ukrainian column of the 47th Mechanized Brigade literally converged, concentrated on one axis. So does that mean that Ukraine also used meat wave attacks during the counteroffensive? We all remember this video from the Kherson offensive. We have
Nu dacă sunt în blindate, ia să vedem asta.
Ukrainian infantry platoons waiting for the assault in tightly packed columns out in the open, only protected by an APC at the front. Right, that's not human waves. Final lesson, it's only human waves when they do it because they are barbarians. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comments section.
Mulțumesc și eu pentru că ați urmărit acest videoclip până la capăt. Hai să-l distribuim, să mai tăiem din minciunile propagandiștilor. Pa, pa!